Okay, so you've probably seen the news coming out of Gordon County, Georgia. It's a really concerning story.
Hmm.
Two former school employees, really young, 23 and 24, indicted, alleged sexual contact with students.
Yeah, it definitely caught my eye. Serious allegations.
Absolutely. So we wanted to do a deep dive here. We're looking at a transcript from the Long Crime Network on YouTube just to try and, unpack what's really going on.
Good idea. It's important to get past the headlines sometimes.
Right. So our sort of mission today is to figure out the actual charges, the legal side of things in Georgia, the timeline, which is interesting, and some pretty surprising personal stuff that's come out too.
Yeah, there are definitely a few layers to peel back here. The charges themselves are probably the best starting point.
Okay, let's do that. So the names are Really Greenon, she's 23, and Brooklyn Schuler, who's 24.
Okay.
Greenan is facing 2 counts of first-degree sexual contact by an employee or agent. Schuler has 1 count of the same charge.
And this is alleged to have happened between, late 2021 and early 2022.
Yeah, exactly. October 2021 to January 2022. And the report says the alleged victims were male students at the school.
Right. But we don't know their specific ages, do we? Or grades.
No, the court documents apparently don't specify that, which could be significant later, I guess.
It could be. And how the indictment came down is also interesting. It was a special presentment, right?
Yeah, what does that mean exactly?
Well, in a county like Gordon, the grand jury might not meet, all the time, like in a big city. So special presentment means they called the grand jury together specifically for this case outside their regular schedule.
Ah, okay. So it signals maybe some regency or importance placed on this by the authorities.
That's generally the implication, yes. It suggests they didn't want to wait for the next regular session.
Okay. That leads us to the whole legal situation in Georgia then. The age of consent there is 16.
Correct.
So when you see felony charges like these, well, it makes you wonder, especially if maybe the students were 16 or older, why felonies?
That's the key question. And it likely comes down to the concept of position of authority or custody.
Ah, the employee-student relationship itself.
Exactly. Even if someone is legally old enough to consent in a general sense, Georgia law and laws in many places look very differently at relationships where there's a significant power imbalance. Think teacher-student, coach-athlete.
Right, right. The law sees that differently.
Yes, and Georgia has apparently broadened this concept over the years. The source mentioned examples like psychiatrist-patient relationships being included too. So the felony charge likely stems directly from their role as school employees.
Okay, so their job title basically makes it a potential felony, regardless of the student's specific age, assuming they were enrolled there.
Pretty much. That position of trust is critical.
The source also brought up this, they called it a Romeo and Juliet provision. Not the actual legal term,
But
obviously,
clear of a concept.
but talking about the age difference. And the fact these are felonies suggests the age gap was probably more than 4 years, more than 48 months.
That's a very reasonable inference. If the age gap was smaller, within that kind of 4-year window, depending on the exact ages, you might be looking at a misdemeanor. Or potentially no charges if both were over 16, the gap was small enough.
Hmm.
But felony charges strongly suggest it's outside that narrow exception.
And the penalties for these felonies, they're not minor.
No, not at all. We're talking potentially 1 to 25 years in prison
Wow.
and or a fine up to $100,000. But, even if they somehow avoided prison time, say through probation,
Still the registry, right?
exactly, being placed on the sex offender registry, that's often described as like a modern scarlet letter. It comes with huge restrictions on where you can live, work.
Hmm.
It impacts your life profoundly long term.
Yeah, that's a massive consequence. Okay, so let's talk about that timeline again. Alleged incidents.
Yeah.
October 21 to January 22. Indictment. June 2024. It's almost 3 years later. Why such a gap?
That does seem like a significant delay. There could be a few reasons, really. Well, investigations take time, especially if digital evidence is involved. Cell phones, social media messages, getting warrants, analyzing data, that can take months, even longer. The GBI, the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, might have been involved.
Okay, so the investigation itself, what else?
You also have to consider potential court backlogs, maybe lingering effects from the pandemic slowing things down.
True, the courts got really backed up.
And another possibility is, behind-the-scenes maneuvering. Defense lawyers might have been talking to the prosecution, maybe trying to negotiate something, presenting their side. That can also draw things out, before an indictment comes down.
And didn't the source mention something about the victims' ages potentially changing during that alleged time frame, like maybe turning 16?
Yes, that was floated as a possibility. If a student turned 16 during the period the contact was allegedly happening,
That complicates things legally, I imagine.
it absolutely does. It adds layers of complexity for lawyers on both sides to sift through. Was the contact before or after the 16th birthday? Does it change the specific charge? That kind of detail work could definitely contribute to the investigation's length.
Makes sense. Okay, shifting gears a bit. This is the part that seems almost out of a movie. The personal relationship between the two accused.
Yeah, the ride or die besties detail.
Right. That apparently comes from social media, wedding sites. Schuler named Grion her maid of honor. They were like gushing descriptions of their friendship online.
It's quite something, especially given the context of the charges they're now facing together.
And the timing. Schuler was planning a wedding for November 2022, so after these alleged incidents started.
Right. And then the report mentioned her fiancé made her wiped photos of her and apparently now has a new wife and child.
Yeah, it paints a picture of, well, a lot of personal drama happening alongside the legal investigation.
Definitely. And then you have Grion, who got married the year before, October 2021, with Schuler as a bridesmaid.
And her husband seemed supportive, posted something positive after the indictment.
That's what the report indicated, yes. A message of support. So you have these incredibly close ties, these major life events, weddings, planned weddings, all happening around the time of and after these alleged incidents.
The source called it salacious. I guess that contrast between the public declarations of friendship and loyalty and the nature of the accusations, it is pretty jarring.
Jarring is a good word for it. It certainly adds a very human and perhaps unexpected element to a serious legal story.
So what about the school district? City of Calhoun School District, they obviously don't work there anymore.
No, unsurprising, they confirmed their former employees.
And they would have passed background checks to get hired in the first place, right?
Typically, yes. Standard procedure for school employees, so likely no prior criminal record that would have flagged them.
Which raises the question of, well, where did these alleged incidents happen? The source speculated maybe not on school grounds because of security, cameras, that kind of thing.
That's a reasonable point to raise. Schools usually have protocols. It's certainly possible the alleged contact occurred elsewhere, but we don't know for sure from the available info.
And the future for these two women, if convicted of these felonies.
Well, beyond the potential prison time and registry we discussed, their careers, especially in education, are almost certainly over.
You couldn't really teach again after something like this, could you?
It's extremely unlikely. A felony conviction, especially of this nature, would make it virtually impossible to work with children again in that capacity.
And the school district itself, could they face any blowback? Civil liability, maybe? For hiring them, especially given they were quite young.
That's a question that sometimes comes up in these situations. Did the district exercise due diligence? Was there adequate supervision? It's possible that could be explored down the line in civil court, separate from the criminal charges against the individuals. The focus legally right now is on the criminal indictment, though.
Okay, so wrapping this up. We've got these really serious felony charges rooted in Georgia law about position of authority, not just the age of consent.
Right. Key distinction.
Then there's the almost 3-year wait for the indictment, suggesting a complex investigation, maybe legal wrangling.
Lots of potential factors in that delay.
And layered on top of all that, this intense best friends relationship playing out very publicly around the same time.
Yeah, that personal dimension is definitely a standout feature of this particular case.
It really paints a complex picture, doesn't it? You've got the legal proceedings, the potential long-term consequences, the question of trust in schools, and this very human, very messy relationship element woven through it.
Absolutely. It touches on the law, institutional responsibility, investigative processes, and just the unpredictable nature of people's lives and choices.
So maybe something for you, the listener, to think about. When we hear about cases like this involving people in positions of trust, especially in schools, what does accountability really look like? How do we balance that against the long-term impact on young lives, even those accused? And maybe what does this say about how we define and enforce those crucial boundaries meant to protect students in educational settings? Lots to consider there.
Indeed. It definitely prompts reflection on the safeguards we have, or perhaps need, in places where vulnerability and authority intersect so closely.